Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I want to look at the weekend of February the 24th and 25th, 2024. So my topic for today is actually something I know pretty much nothing about, or rather someone I know nothing about. I hadn't heard of them until yesterday. So let me show you what piqued my interest. So here is an article from on the sort of NPR website, and it says Wendy Williams is diagnosed with aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. So yes, I had never heard of Wendy Williams before. But apparently she is a sort of mega broadcaster, someone who has had a long career, who has been very successful. She's sort of a DJ. She has described as a shock jock. She's been controversial. There's been a lot of gossip, and she's really into gossip. She's been sort of accused of making sort of homophobic slurs, and she had until 2022 she had something called the Wendy Williams show. Yes, so she has just been diagnosed with aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. Well, I think actually she was diagnosed last year, so it's not to happen just now. And she's only 59, and so it says here, Wendy Williams, the former TV talk show host and shock jock, has been diagnosed with aphasia and frontotemporal dementia, her medical team announced. In a news release Thursday, her team said Williams, 59, received her diagnosis last year and that the conditions have already presented significant hurdles in Wendy's life. Wendy is still able to do many things for herself, her team said. Most importantly, her team said, noting that she is appreciative of the kind thoughts and wishes being sent to her. Most importantly, she maintains her trademark sense of humour and is receiving the care she requires to make sure she is protected and that her needs are addressed. So, news of her latest medical diagnosis comes days ahead of the lifetime premiere of Where is Wendy Williams, a two-part documentary detailing her health battles following the end of her syndicated talk show in 2022. Williams, a former TV host of the Wendy Williams show, stepped away from the world of broadcasting following a series of health issues. Williams has also Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder, also has Graves' disease, an autoimmune disorder affecting the thyroid. So in 2022, due to her ongoing health battles, it was announced that her syndicated daytime short talk show would end after a 13-year run on TV. Also, in 2022, the 59-year-old was placed under temporary financial guardianship after her bank, Wells Fargo, raised questions, claiming in a New York court that she is an incapacitated person, the Hollywood Reporter reports. So that's what I want to talk about, Wendy Williams. You might know more about her than me. I haven't made a great effort to look at her biography aside from sort of looking at her Wikipedia page, but she does have a time chart, which I'm going to look at, and that is going to be that's going to be my topic for today. But before I do that, I want to look at the I Ching and the astrology for this weekend, the weekend of Wednesday, February the 24th and 25th, 2024. So the moon is now moving into Virgo. In fact, the moon moves into Virgo London time at 1:37 a.m. on Saturday. That means that for most of us, pretty much all weekend long, the moon will be in Virgo. If you are in Australia and New Zealand, then the moon will move into Virgo sort of I would sort of off the top of my head, something like the early afternoon. So even if you're in Australia and New Zealand, it's a very moon in Virgo weekend, and it doesn't move into Libra at the end of the weekend. It's just solid move. It's solid moon in Virgo. So that does create a difference, doesn't it? I mean, the moon, having been in Leo, moving into Virgo, does create a change. I think that with moon in Leo, a lot of us were quite concerned about ourselves, and some of us might have wanted attention, were perhaps seeking a bit of praise, and also the moon in Leo, was a planet in a fire sign. It was the only planet in a fire sign. Okay, I know Chiron's in Aries, but I'm not really counting Chiron there. So some of that fire, some of that spark, it wasn't much. It was a bit fragile, just moon in Leo. Some of that spark has gone. And so we might feel with moon in Virgo that things are a little boring again. That some of the excitement that was around at the end of last week has gone. And with moon in Virgo, the traditional things we have to say about moon in Virgo, it is a time when we are perhaps more focused on detail, when we like to get things right. When we notice things that we normally miss. And, we shouldn't forget that Moon in Virgo is a very health-orientated placement. So, we're more sensitive than usual. We should sort of avoid, additives in our food, chemical pollutants, smoke. Okay, some signs more than others, but in general, all of us, we are more aware, and we should. We should have a healthy, try to have a healthy existence. Now, the moment the moon moves into Virgo, really it starts to make a full moon, and so it's very much a full moon weekend. So I don't know, depending on the cloud situation, you should be able to see that full moon. And this full moon, as I've already said, I mean, when I looked at my weekly, I did my sort of weekly summary. I mentioned the fact there is this full moon, and I did do a couple of days back. I did do a video where I really focused on the full moon. But this full moon represents the tension, perhaps, between our desire for order and the disintegrating forces outside, perhaps represented by Pisces. I gave the imagery of someone trying to build sandcastles on a beach, in immaculate detail. They may be beautiful sandcastles. You may have sorted out the architectural details down to the last grain of sand, but then the tide comes. When the tide sort of starts rising, and then within a few minutes, the whole thing has collapsed. And so that's a challenge, perhaps, with a full moon in Virgo. And somehow we have to integrate the two forces. We have to create order, but also we have to be aware of a complicated and changing environment. So if we are too inflexible in the way we create order, then we're asking for trouble. So we've always got to make an assumption that things could change. Now, this full moon is on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. It's sort of Sun is on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. I mean, when I discussed this full moon, I was suggesting in some respects it's a farewell new full moon, not just for the day it's happening, but for the whole, next fortnight. It's a time for saying goodbyes, for leaving certain situations that that have had their day. We might be sad, but nothing lasts forever. So consider what things in your life this weekend you want to say goodbye to. Okay, you can be a bit sad, but don't be too sad, because when you get rid of one thing, something else should take its place. But still, I mean, I know that the sun is in Pisces, and it's a very sort of supposedly a very sort of emotional placement for the sun, for the sun. And don't forget, Mercury is now in Pisces, and Saturn's in Pisces, Neptune's in Pisces. But the moon is making an opposition to Saturn. And so moon and Virgo opposition Saturn does suggest that some of us could find it difficult to express our feelings, or we might find that other people find it difficult to express our feelings. There may be a certain sense of emotional restraint. Now, that does not mean to say there are not emotions flying around. There are, but these emotions may not be expressed in a natural way. Now, that could be that the emotions are building up, and there's a certain amount of tension with that moon opposition Saturn. And also with moon in Virgo, there's a certain tendency of moon in Virgo to notice details which are not necessarily massively important, or to focus on the wrong things. We might be focusing on surface appearances. That's a very nice piece of lichen on that volcano. Spent a long time halfway up a volcano just looking at the lichen on the volcano, or looking at some dandelion growing on the volcano, when meanwhile all the while the volcano is erupting. I suppose that could be the case. We do need to be aware of those emotional undercurrents. Also, to kind of support that, on Saturday, Venus is making a semi-sextile to Saturn. So that means that Venus and Saturn are 30 degrees apart. So you got Venus in Aquarius. Venus is the planet of relationships. It's in Aquarius, trying to be reasonable, trying to be a bit detached, but it's semi-sextile Saturn. Saturn, in some respects, may support Venus in its detachment, but on the other hand, we need to bring together two forces that are not entirely comfortable with each other. It's the need to relate. It's the need to be detached. It's the need to be responsible, the need to be disciplined, and bringing it all together could be hard work, especially in relationships. We have to keep our distance without being cold, and that's something that we perhaps need to work on. So moving on to Sunday, on Sunday we're still going to be feeling this full moon. We're still going to have the moon in Virgo. So in some respects, Sunday is going to be fairly similar to Saturday. But Venus, having made the semi-sextile to Saturn on Saturday, Venus makes a square to Jupiter on Sunday. So Venus in Aquarius is square Jupiter in Taurus. Square Jupiter in Taurus. So Venus, the lesser benefic, Jupiter, the greater benefic, and they're in square to each other. It's not like a conjunction or a trine. A square there is an element of tension there. When you've got two benefic planets, Venus and Jupiter, in aspect like that, it can be a bit overindulgent. Some of us might feel that, the world is a bit too dry, a bit, there's not enough spark, and we have to do something to make something happen. And I'm afraid some of us might be tempted to spend money because Venus is square Jupiter. Venus square Jupiter can be about overindulgence, and it can be about financial overindulgence. So if you're buying anything on Sunday, and possibly Saturday as well, but more so on Sunday, and of course nowadays with Amazon, you don't, just because everything's shut, you can buy you can buy whatever you like on Sunday and get it. If you can't get it the same day, at least you can get it tomorrow. So there's that instant gratification. People don't save up for things anymore, do they? But with that Venus square Jupiter, you might be you might be tempted to buy an expensive item, perhaps to make yourself feel better. Maybe you feel the world is a bit dry, lifeless. Or you might decide to, go to a restaurant or some form of entertainment and spend too much money. So, okay, sure, if you've got the money, fine. Obviously, the people listening to me have all sorts of different income levels, but it's all relative. But be wary. Don't just buy money. Don't just spend money on the first thing it comes to mind. I mean, not just because you need the money, and you not just because you necessarily can't afford it, but because it's the wrong way to expend your energy. You can't spend your way out of a full moon conjunct, which is lined up with Mercury and Saturn. It's just not possible. You instead should be trying to think about other ways for making your life feeling better and more sort of smooth flowing. And so spending money is probably not too desirable. Also, Venus square Jupiter can be about relating, and it can be quite emotional, and it can be about the attempt to break through an emotional deadlock with extra emotion, perhaps making a special effort to be nice to someone, a special effort to be warm and friendly and nurturing. It's going to be hard work. Venus is in Aquarius, Jupiter is in Taurus, but that might be one manifestation of it. But I think there might be a certain tendency to feel that certain emotions, certain ways of relating are the right ways of relating, because it is a fixed square, Venus in Aquarius, Jupiter in Taurus. So yes, you have to relate to someone like this. You have to be nice. You have to be accommodating. That's the way to do it. Well, maybe not. You have to adjust to take into account the changing circumstances. And I suppose I also need to point out that Mars on Sunday is semi-sextile Saturn. Mars at 9:13 Aquarius is semi-sextile Saturn at 9 Pisces. Well, really, I need to say that the Venus-Mars conjunction, which is now separating, that whole Venus-Mars conjunction is sextile Saturn over the weekend. So, Venus-Mars can be about sexuality and relating and desirability, and it's sextile Saturn. So that kind of indicates some kind of inhibition, somehow feeling, some of us might feel that our attempts to be, desirous and attractive may be rebuffed. That's a possibility. Also, the Mars sextile Saturn on Sunday could could be a little bit frustrating. We're trying to get something done, but someone is getting in our way. So that could be a bit of a problem. Now we also need to be careful about the way we communicate over the weekend. Look at Mercury. So Mercury is at 3 Pisces. So Mercury is the communication planet, and Mercury is on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, and it's on the Venus-Neptune midpoint. So Mercury is on the midpoint. Mercury brings together on one hand Neptune, and on the other hand the Venus-Mars conjunction. And Mercury is the way we communicate. It's the way we process information. So the way we try to understand the world and communicate with the world could be a little bit confused. There may be sort of lots of false signals flying around. Mercury on the Venus-Neptune midpoint. Venus-Neptune is about other people, our understanding of other people. Can be a bit deceptive, actually, Mercury on the Venus-Neptune midpoint. The things we say may not make much sense, or we might give the wrong impression. At the same time, the things other people say may be difficult to fathom. And yes, we might reach the wrong conclusions. So I think we need to be a bit careful about that. Although, with Mercury on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, there's an attraction there towards things that are a bit dangerous, a bit. Things that inhabit the shadows, certain temptation there. But maybe we'll like to talk about that. Maybe we can just keep it to a verbal level. We can talk about, we can perhaps talk about dangerous things without actually taking any risks. So that gives you a broad picture of the weekend, at least as I see it. And now I'm going to focus on the 12 signs. So these are my star sign forecasts for the weekend. Sorry, when I say star sign forecast, I must emphasize that some people like to look at the 12 signs from a perspective of the sun sign, star sign. Other people look at the ascendant sign, or the moon sign. I don't tell you what you should do with these forecasts. It really is up to you. If you know your ascendant, most people do, then by all means use your ascendant rather than your sun sign. If you want to use your moon sign, nothing wrong with using your moon sign. It's whatever you feel most comfortable with, and maybe you can there can be a certain sense of trial and error. Anyway, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of February the 24th and 25th, 2024. Aries, you perhaps need to do a bit of work. Now, by work, I mean organization. The moon is in Virgo. It's perhaps not the best placement from an Aries perspective, but every now and then things do have to be sorted out. There's just no way around it. It needn't take too long, but if you are trying to structure your environment, particularly your immediate environment, your living space, it may be slightly frustrating because you have to remember there is this full moon this weekend. you're trying your hardest to make sure everything's in order, but outside forces could perhaps mess things up for you. Now, in fact, not just outside forces. It might actually be internal forces. You mustn't underestimate the unconscious mind. Your mind is moving. It's moving all over the place. So, for example, you might decide, you're going to sort something out. And so I don't know, might be completely trivial, like tidying something up. And you're doing it, and then, it's boring, and your mind wanders, and you find yourself doing something completely different. So that is a possibility. But also, outside pressures could certainly have an impact. So you do need to be disciplined and flexible this weekend. I should also say that this full moon, the Virgo full moon, which takes place usually once a year. I suppose sometimes it can take place twice a year. It can happen, I suppose, right at the beginning of a month and right at the end of a month. I think that is possible. I think, even though February is a shorter month than usual, but that's unusual. Usually, the Virgo full moon takes place once a year, and it's a full moon that, from an Aries perspective, can be quite orientated around health. So, it's a time when you might want to consider your health and well-being and lifestyle, and you might have some realizations over the weekend. Perhaps you'll start to look at something you're doing and you're thinking, hold on, that's not very healthy, that's not very good for me. I mean, I've got into this habit, and this habit is not doing me any good. Maybe, it could be to do with overeating, or perhaps undereating, or, I don't know, smoking, taking drugs. But of course, I say that from a perspective. I'm in Washington State. You can buy, like many states in the U.S., you can buy. If you're over 21, there are shops you can go to buy marijuana. So in this state, it's not a big deal. So that might be an issue. So just something you're doing that may not be particularly healthy, or perhaps something you're failing to do. Exercise, or maybe you need to consider your environment in terms of pollutants, what kind of stuff you're breathing in. So give consideration to that this weekend with the full moon. And I'm not trying to scare you. I'm certainly not giving medical advice. I'm just telling you, Virgo. I'm telling you, Aries, that is something that I think you might want to be somewhat aware of. Now, in looking at things from another angle, I do think that your social life is still quite important to you. Perhaps not as important as it used to be. I mean, this is because, there were a lot of planets in Aquarius, but now planets are moving out of Aquarius. And, Aquarius, from an Aries perspective, is connected with socializing. And, you've got Mars Mars, your ruler, is in Aquarius. So, you will be comfortable when you're with other people, when you're with your friends, people you like and trust. But, if you are socializing, you just may feel that something is stuck, especially on Sunday. It's not moving as much as it should be moving. And I think that perhaps, fundamentally, you're perhaps realizing that you need more space, that you're not entirely comfortable, in some people's company, and your own company might feel preferable. Which brings me on to the subject of close relationships. Venus and Mars are still making a conjunction. I mean, I know that conjunction is past. They're now, Venus is now over a degree away from Mars. So, you and someone else may, can still get close to each other, get closer to each other. There's still a need for, one-to-one contacts, and you can certainly be very attractive and charming as ever. But, something now has to be negotiated. Venus and Mars are making a semi-sextile aspect to Saturn. Perhaps you're more self-conscious. Perhaps you're sort of more aware about what you like and what you don't like. Perhaps you're starting to look at details you hadn't looked at before. However close the relationship is, just a little bit of distance, a little bit of objectivity may be a good thing. Taurus. Well, Taurus, I think that you, in many respects, benefit from the moon moving into Virgo. I think recently you've been a little too introspective. You have been thinking about yourself and your boundaries, and you've wanted to do things your way. But your way in a way that's, a bit, how should I put it, defended. Your own space has certainly been important to you, but now you're beginning to open up a little with the moon moving into Virgo. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Because, Taurus is an earth sign, and so with the moon moving into Virgo, you're feeling better able to express yourself, better able to demonstrate your creative needs. So if there's something you like doing that perhaps you haven't done for a long time, now may be the time to do it and to start enjoying it. And you need to be clear that this is something you want to do. Because there may be opposition. I mean, remember, there is a full moon over the weekend, Taurus. So with this full moon, not everyone is going to be happy about what you're doing. There may be pressure to do something else, especially if you're mixing with friends. You're trying to accommodate other people. Yeah, there's a danger that you accommodate other people to the extent to which you lose sight of yourself and your own core needs. That is really important. Friends. We talk about friends as if friends are something positive. It may be that right now, this weekend, friends may not be positive. Some of the people you know and trust, who you've known for a long time, their input may actually be less than constructive, and their input may be influenced by their own emotional concerns. So, if someone you know well, probably not a member of your family, but someone you know well outside your family, gives you some advice or tells you something, okay, don't reject the advice out of hand, but ask yourself, why are they saying what they are saying? What is actually motivating them? Are they being objective, or are they actually projecting onto you their own private concerns? So do bear that in mind. And that's why you just shouldn't follow people's advice automatically. In fact, that applies especially to advice relating to your career and your work and how you're trying to sort out your direction in life. That is because Saturn, moving through Pisces, is making a semi-sextile to Venus, which is your ruling planet. So Saturn in Pisces can represent another person who is trying to restrict your freedom. They might say it's in your interest what they're advising, but possibly not. So yeah, that is something that you really do have to consider. Now, I'm not saying that you should completely ignore your social life, that you should shun your friends. Rather, you should ask yourself, how does your social life support your own creative needs? That should always be your question. Because, very often when you're with other people, you do things the other people's way. You just follow the crowd and you lose sight of yourself. And I just think it's really important to keep that in mind. And that should probably be your guiding principle also in terms of relationships. I think in terms of relationships, things needn't be bad. The moon is moving through Virgo. In many respects, moon moving through Virgo from a Taurian perspective, it's quite romantic. It's, if you find someone else to support your creativity, you can really get on well with that person, and have fun with them. But it's got to be the right person. It's got to be all about what you want, just as much, if not more, from what the other person wants. So that really does need to be considered. When deciding who you want to spend the weekend with. Gemini, you possibly, Gemini, may find that your first impulse is to maybe just keep a low profile. You may feel that you don't need to be around other people. You don't need to be out there in the world. That you are perhaps going to be most comfortable in a secluded place, probably your own home. And in a way, you're right. But there is a full moon this weekend, and that does indicate a challenge. Yes, you've got to consider yourself. You've perhaps got to consider your family. You've got to consider your private interests. But there are things going on out there which are really quite difficult to ignore. And that is especially going to be the case if you're doing anything of a career nature over the weekend, or not just career, just work. Whether it's work just for the sort of long term or just because you need to make some money right now. Whatever reason you're working, it's a weekend. I suppose most people are not working, but even if you're not working, there are pressures or concerns relating to work that may be quite prominent this weekend that you do have to take into consideration, or you may have to take into consideration. And so that is going to be a bit challenging, and somehow you have to get the balance right. You can't ignore the pressures from the outside world, but at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that your own private security needs must be looked after. And I think that matters are perhaps made more complicated by the fact that Mercury is your ruling planet. Mercury has now gone into Pisces, and from a Gemini perspective, Pisces is quite a high-profile sign. So there is that push to have a high profile. But, Mercury in Pisces is not in a great position. It's in Pisces. It's in the sign of its it's in the sign of its detriment. Further, it's starting to move towards a conjunction with the Sun at a time when there is a full moon. So if you spend too long, out there in the world, away from your home, you might just lose. You might just feel that you're losing touch, that you're losing connections with what is real, and there may be a desire on your part to just retreat back. So perhaps you do need to get the balance right, and don't spend too long away from your roots. Ideally, don't spend too long. Don't be too far away from home if possible. Okay, maybe you're traveling over the weekend and you can't do anything about it. But just do, always consider your security needs and your need for grounding, because I think it is really important. So that, I think, is the main focus this weekend. Oh, well, I should say also that Geminis could get confused by people, maybe particularly sort of relationships. If you are in a relationship or you're spending a lot of time with one other person, there is a danger that you sort of lose touch with what's going on. You might feel that you really don't know what the other person is thinking, or you might think you know what they're thinking and feeling, but actually you get it wrong. You might focus on the wrong things. So when trying to understand someone, you might focus on the wrong details, and as a result, there might be a misunderstanding. So when you're with someone, especially on a one-to-one level, you've got to keep an open mind. Even if you know that person really well, keep an open mind. You don't know what another person is thinking and feeling. So do be careful there. And also be careful about your own thoughts. Your own thoughts could be swayed by irrelevant considerations. And, if you make any decisions this weekend, they might be the wrong decisions. Even though there is a full moon this weekend, and the full moons are often about the truth. So perhaps, Gemini, what it is saying, yes, the truth is going to be revealed to you this weekend, perhaps about what you want to do in life, or what you want to do, not just in life, but where you want to go, what sort of attitude you want to have towards your career, what kind of things you want to be doing in terms of work, business, etc. The truth is there, but when you get the truth, it's kind of raw truth, and you then have to think about the truth, and you have to start to understand the truth. So yeah, you might get the truth, you might see things the way it really is, but then spoil it by misinterpreting what you see. So once you see the truth, sit on it, contemplate it, consider, spend some time considering it. And I would have said, this weekend it's probably not a good idea to make decisions. Cancer. Cancerians tend to be quite sensitive to the lunation cycle. And this weekend there is a full moon. So your Cancerian emotions are going to be finely tuned, but they are going to be swinging this way and that. Specifically, Cancer, you're perhaps going to be torn between the big picture, and the small details. And how do you bring the two together? So there'll be times when you're able to sort of relax, take a broad perspective. People might notice this. You're going with the flow, everything's nice, and then suddenly you notice something, and this sort of brings you back to earth, brings you down to earth, and you say something that is totally unexpected. You're I don't know, full moon. All that stuff in Pisces is maybe about just letting go, seeing the cosmos for in all its glory, and perhaps other people are enjoying this sort of cosmic moment, and then Cancer suddenly wakes up and says, this is nonsense, or something like that. Moon in Virgo, or makes some little criticism. You've got a button undone, something like that. Something that just spoils the magic. Maybe it's necessary. Maybe it's an important detail. But I think if you're a Cancerian, that might be part of what's going on. So making really mundane statements and observations, Cancer, be careful. I think there's plenty of scope here, Cancer, for you to spoil the magic, whatever you're doing. But you are sensitive to the lunation cycle, as I said. You can swing from one way of being to another, and you can swing really quickly. And I don't mean that in a pathological sense. It's just the way you are, and there is a full moon, and so it's natural to behave like that, and it's also absolutely appropriate, Cancer, that you are considering detail. I mean, the moon is your ruling planet, and it's in Virgo, so this weekend, having a Virgoan approach, focusing on material details matters, or indeed perhaps Virgo often connected with health. So if you're thinking about your own health and the way you're running your life, your lifestyle, perhaps now's the time to sort of get rid of things that aren't doing you any good, and I think you're going to be very aware of that. I think that is going to be important. As turning to relationships, there is a full moon, and this full moon is opposition Saturn. The moon is applying to an opposition of Saturn, or it depends where you are. It depends on your time zone. Is it? So I won't say applying to an opposition of Saturn. The moon is, moon is in Virgo, Saturn's in Pisces. So they're opposite each other. So in terms of one-to-one relationships, it may occur to you that you and someone else may have a difference of approach or a difference of opinion. Now, that someone else could be anyone. It depends on the circumstances. It might be a friend. It might be, I don't know, a business partner. It might be a spouse. It depends. But there's just someone who you do have a difference of opinion with. It's on a subject of some importance. And, you have to be careful. I think it was William Lilly who said, the 17th century astrologer, he said a square is perfect enmity and an opposition is perfect hatred. I'm just exaggerating that. I'm just kidding. But with the opposition, you do have to be aware of the tension there. And it's not something you can just sweep under the carpet. You need to accept that you and you and someone else are not entirely alike, that there are certain issues on which you disagree, and rather than fight about it, rather than argue about it, just accept it. I don't know, vive la différence, or whatever the French say. So that's probably how best to manage it. But it may be possible. It may be there is a possibility that you may come to the conclusion this weekend that there is one person out there and you don't like them, and that's the way it is. And unfortunately, in the Cancerian world, when Cancerians decide they don't like someone, that is it, usually. So maybe, go back. Maybe that statement from William Lilly that the opposition is perfect hatred, especially with the full moon. Maybe you will realize that there's someone you hate. Maybe it's someone you don't know. Maybe it's someone you read about in the news. Biden or Putin or someone, you just realize that there's someone out there who you really hate. So do consider that possibility. But overall, relationships do have to be treated with great caution because of that full moon. It's unlikely to be easy, and if relationships are going to be successful, it's because you've negotiated the difference between yourself and another person. Leo. Well, Leo, it is a time when you're probably not completely yourself. There is this full moon. And this full moon this weekend might make you a bit introspective. You may take the view that there are difficult issues to deal with that need careful thought. And the Sun remains conjunct the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. The Sun is your ruler, and so Sun on a Mercury-Saturn midpoint, particularly at the time of the full moon, it may be a weekend of endings for you, because as I've said on several occasions, this full moon, the Mercury-Saturn pair is about farewells. It's about goodbyes, realizing that nothing lasts forever. The full moon shows you the truth about something, and it shows you the consequences of something. Those consequences may perhaps be financial. You're perhaps aware that something is costing too much money, and so it may be from a financial perspective you have decided that something has come to an end. Perhaps something is costing you too much. Perhaps someone is costing you too much. But it may not be about money, but it is about endings. So just consider all the things going on in your life, things that are no longer working as well as they used to work. And so then, do consider how you might want to bring about an ending. You don't have to be brutal about it. It's about a situation that you, in your heart of hearts, you already knew it was coming to an end, and now it's becoming clear. And if you like, you're perhaps ready to take action to finally create that ending. And as I've already suggested, there is a certain financial element to the weekend. I think that some Leos, if they're honest with themselves, may reach some conclusions about how best to deal with their finances, and there may be a moment of clarity. So if you're working with money, you're doing the sums. All of a sudden, things could just suddenly add up. Things will be clear. and you will see what needs to be done. And it's not just perhaps about getting rid of something that's costing too much. It's just seeing the situation for what it is, and then being able to take action. Action is important, and so you don't have to take that action straight away. Indeed, now is probably not the right time to be taking action. We do have a full moon, so things could, things are all still a bit up in the air, and you're not really in the right position to actually be doing something. Turning to relationships, Venus and Mars are still making a conjunction in your seventh house, or at least your opposite sign from your star sign. You're a Leo. Venus and Mars are in Aquarius. And Saturn is making a semi-sextile to Venus and Mars. I think that you can see that relationships are there. There are one-to-one relationships that probably have to be dealt with, but you're starting to have your doubts about certain people, I think. Okay, it may not be doubts, but you're perhaps realizing that someone is more complicated than you'd realized. And then you have to ask yourself, are those complications worth the effort? And I think that from an emotional perspective, I think, Leo, you're holding on to quite a lot over the weekend. So possibly one-to-one relationships, should be treated with a bit of caution, a bit of distance. Are you able to give another person everything? Are you able to really, are you really able to, make someone really happy this weekend? Are you able to give a good impression this weekend? The answer is probably no, So I would have said overall, one-to-one relationships, Leo, should possibly be avoided, or you can put them on, putting someone on hold might not be such a bad idea. I mean, things are in a process of flux, and so unless you're really, really close to someone. I mean, really close. If you're really close to someone, and you are on completely the same wavelength as them, and you're really sure about that, in that case, I think relationships can actually work really well. You and that other person can have a brilliant weekend. But you have to be really close, and there has to be no conflict. There has to be complete understanding. So to an extent, it kind of depends on the situation. Virgo. It could be an important weekend because it's the Virgo full moon. The Virgo full moon that happens once a year. So, the moon is moving through your star sign, or your ascendant sign, or your moon sign, depending on how you're looking at, or depending on how you're deciding to read these my 12 sign forecasts. So moon is moving through your sign, and it is opposition the sun in Pisces. This full moon, the Virgo full moon, which will take place in February or March every year, is a time for Virgos to see the truth of the matter. I mean, it's 6 months, approximately 6 months since your birthday. So from if your sun is in Virgo, But even if it's not, if you're a Virgo ascendant, you can perhaps see things from a perspective of another person, but you can start to see the truth of the matter. And I think the truth of the matter may have a lot to do with other people, seeing people for what they are, understanding what they're like, especially on an emotional level. You can really see it. But you've got to be honest with yourself. Sometimes Virgo, you might not want to accept the truth. You might decide to just look at one small part of the truth, and not really care about the underlying truth. That is some danger, but I think with this full moon, you do see everything, and the question is, what can you do with that knowledge? Just because we really know something, just because something's clear, doesn't mean that we get progress. I mean, it's like being in therapy, isn't it? I mean, you can spend years in therapy with a really good therapist, and then you can talk about every single minutiae of your life, and you can know all about your various problems, what happened in your childhood, and you can absolutely know what all your problems are, but it doesn't mean a thing, because knowing about our problems is not the same as actually changing things, because changing things can be really difficult. And so perhaps that's part of what you're dealing with. You can see the problem. You can see what should be changed. You can see how you can be doing things better, but you might do nothing about it, or you might just focus on some cosmetic detail, change one small thing which in the grand scheme of things is irrelevant. So I think, Virgo, you need to be aware of that. And also, as far as relationships are concerned, this full moon will show you about the true nature of someone who's important to you. But do you want to do anything about it? Do you want to make any changes to a relationship just because you've understood something? Maybe not. Maybe you'll feel that that's not something you want to do because it's too much like hard work, or you don't want to risk conflict. What is the right thing for you to do? I don't know. I mean, in a way, that is for you to decide. And I suppose it's this kind of this difficult and contradictory situation. The moon is in your star. The moon is in your sign. So in one sense, you are aware and you are sensitive and you understand what's going on. You even understand what people are feeling. But in another sense, Mercury is. Mercury, your ruler, is in Pisces, kind of rather a chaotic sign, and it's moving towards a conjunction of the Sun, and that might make it difficult for you to really engage with the facts. Somehow it is a problem. You're a very fact-based person, yet you don't really want to really spend time with the facts. You don't want to spend time with the facts to the extent that you look at the facts and you say, well, this is what needs to be done, and then you're going to go and do it. Okay, you might realize what needs to be done, but you might decide that you just don't want to do it. So do bear that in mind. So, I mean, to finish this, I think it's a challenging weekend. I think it's a weekend where you have to be very honest with yourself, and you have to understand that if you want change, it's not just about awareness. It is about action. Libra. Well, Libra, I think that you are aware that you are living in a complicated world. Okay, I understand we are all living in a complicated world. But Libra, I think you understand that there are things going on that you don't fully understand, and also you might feel that when you're surrounded by people, when you're with other people, you're not really in a position to make decisions because you're kind of crowded out. Too many people around you, just difficult to know what's going on. So maybe this weekend it might be a good idea, for example, not to go to parties, not to be in places where there are lots of other people around you, because I don't think you'll feel particularly comfortable, and you just might feel sort of out of place. So Libra, don't allow yourself to be pressurized. So if you're invited to things this weekend and someone implores you to go to something, don't feel you have to go there. You don't. You can just hold off. That is absolutely fine. And another thing, Libra, is you do have to consider what you want to do. And I've talked about this before. I think over the last week, your creative self-expression is very important. If you are in a place where there's people everywhere, when you have to deal with friends, when you have to accommodate friends, when you have to, or even not just friends, anyone, if you have to keep accommodating people, you might find you just get ground down. Especially on Saturday, Venus, your ruler, is semi-sextile Saturn. Saturn is a difficult influence. It can be connected with drudgery, with having to do routine things and doing things that are perhaps for other people. Having to do routine things you don't want to do, things that are boring. They just prevent you from expressing yourself in the way you want to express yourself. They get in the way of your own creativity. So if someone asks you to do something, don't necessarily do it. Now, there may be an obligation. It may be something needs to be done. Something small needs to be done. Just to make everyone happy, but you need to know what you're letting yourself in for. Just doing something just to make other people happy is not a good idea, because you'd be losing sight of yourself. And I think that is a particular problem on Saturday. On Sunday, Venus, which is your Venus is your ruler. Venus is square Jupiter. That Venus square Jupiter may encourage you to do something that's a little bit excessive, to go too far in one area. And I've talked about this Venus square Jupiter in general for all the 12 signs, and I've suggested, well, it might be connected with over expenditure, and so that's certainly something you need to consider. Spending too much money on something. It might seem like a good idea to spend money, but once you start spending money, it may be difficult to stop, or you might spend too much money. So this weekend, Sunday in particular, do be careful about money. Do be careful about trusting other people with money, or letting other people make decisions about your money or joint finances or how much money is going to be spent. Don't lend people your credit card, for example. That would be a really bad thing to do, even if they ask nicely. So yeah, be careful about your money. Be careful about other people's money, especially on Sunday, because if you're just blasé and relaxed about it, you might find that something happens that you really weren't planning on, and it may be once it's happened, it may be too late to make amends. So yeah, so on Sunday, avoid uncharacteristic indulgence on Sunday. Just doing something that is excessive, and don't trust other people not to be indulgent or not to take liberties. So that's what you need to do. Sorry, I'm not more positive, but we have to be realistic, don't we? I mean, that's what it's all about. Scorpio. I think Scorpio, you are in. I mean, you're in a reasonable frame of mind. I think that you're feeling relatively sociable with the moon in Virgo. I think you'll enjoy other people's company, so you check out what other people are doing. I think you might actually enjoy finding out about the details of other people's lives. For some reason, it'll be interesting. You don't have to say much. You just have to listen to what other people are doing. I think you might actually find that to be, how should I put it, gently amusing. But at the same time, if you spend too much time with other people, if you spend too much time surrounded by people, you might start to think too much. I mean, don't forget there's a full moon, and this full moon is perhaps going to make you reflect about the nature of other people's lives, the lives of your friends, maybe what they've been doing with their lives in the past. And if you start to think too much about someone else's life, you might start to think about your own life and what you have been doing. So in that sense, there may be a certain, I say, risk of making comparisons. It's very easy, isn't it, to judge yourself and to judge your progress not in an absolute level, but to judge it by comparison. So I think Scorpios, might find themselves comparing. You might find yourself comparing yourself to someone else, particularly a friend. Could be someone else, not a friend, but just how have they done compared with how you have done? It's always the case, isn't it? You think you're doing great, and then you find that someone else is doing better, and it just spoils everything. It's kind of human nature, isn't it? We're not satisfied with what we've got. We always make comparisons. So try not to take that risk, but it may be inevitable that you will start making those kinds of comparison. And I think that if possible, you need to be more self-centered. I know being self-centered is has a bad rap, being self-centered, because it's it's kind of too selfish. But you are the center of the universe. I mean, we all are the center of the universe. I mean, what was it, Aleister Crowley in the Book of the Law? He said, what did he say? Every man and every woman is a star. he wrote that in 1904. We are all, in our own way, a star at the center of things. So being self-centered is okay, and evaluating everything from your own egocentric perspective is okay. You don't have to consider what's going on around you too much today. Too much this weekend. You need to ground things in your world, and not allow your peace of mind to be upset. I mean, your peace of mind might be upset a little because Mars is your ruling planet, and sort of Mars is making a semi-sextile to Saturn. So Saturn could be an irritation. Something is spoiling your peace of mind. Not in a way of conflict. And it's like you're being reminded of something. You're just reminded of something. You know what? I think you're being reminded about something you're not doing. I think that's a problem. Well, I don't say it is a problem, actually. It may actually be quite a good thing. It seems to me, Scorpio, that there may be something you're really good at that you're not doing. And it's eating away at you. You know you're good at it, but you're not doing it. You'd almost like to pretend you didn't have this ability. It's like you have a talent. You'd like to pretend you don't have this talent, and you're pretending it's not there, but it is there. And there's this little reminder that keeps happening because of this Mars semi-sextile Saturn. You could ignore this reminder, but maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should make a note of it. You don't have to do anything right now, but make a note of it. There's some aspect of you, some talent that you need to start using. Don't have to do it this weekend, but maybe over the next few weeks you need to consider how you can address this issue. Okay, I suppose I should very quickly say something about relationships. I would have said, in terms of relationships, it's either there or it's not, in terms of this weekend. If you're with someone, that's fine. You just take it as it stands. Take it as it stands, as it is right now. It's not a time for changing relationships or for looking for new relationships. It's just taking what you've got. If you're relating to someone in a particular way, then I think you will continue relating to that person in that particular way, for better or for worse, over the weekend. And so I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but that seems to be the way it is. It's because, I think mainly it's because there's this conjunction between Venus and Mars. Yes, Venus and Mars are starting to move apart a bit, but Venus and Mars are both in fixed signs. So, that does suggest a sort of a lack of change, a certain stability there. And maybe some useful distance, so you can just, you've got a little bit of distance between you and that other person in your life. If that other person is in your life, you can see things for what they are, and so there's no need for any real drama. Just take things as they are. Sagittarius. Okay, Sagittarius. This weekend there is a full moon. I think this full moon may be of some significance to you. This full moon is hitting an important axis of your chart. Sagittarius is a mutable sign, and the other mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces. And so this full moon is across the mutable signs of Virgo and Pisces, and it may indicate some conflict in terms of where you want to go and where other people want you to go. Where is the pressure? Your family, for example, the people you know really well might be expecting you to go in one direction, but you should perhaps be going in another direction. And it's tempting to think that it's an either-or situation. Do you do one thing or you do another thing? But it can't be an either-or situation. You have to somehow tune into the balance of this weekend's full moon. You have to make progress. You have to decide, for example, what you want to do next week. You have to perhaps make plans in terms of your work. But you also have to consider the people close to you, particularly your family. And you have to have a situation where there is mutual respect. And at the same time, I think this weekend it's going to be important that you understand other people's weaknesses. Certain people are in a weak position. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about some of the people you have to deal with on a regular basis. They're really not seeing things clearly. They're confused. They don't really know how to make good decisions. And it may be that there's someone close to you who's trying to make a decision, who's trying to make sense of something, and they are completely failing. They don't know what to do, and they may be actually on the verge of making a mistake. So Sagittarius, that might put you in a position where you need to help. So if someone is flailing around looking for a solution, perhaps a member of your family, perhaps, I think you can help. I think it's like you can sort of intuitively know what needs to be done and what this person should be doing. So it's not about spending an hour giving someone a long lecture about what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong. It's just perhaps about listening to them a bit and just coming up with the first answer that comes into your head. Maybe, I mean, I'm not saying that you should be cavalier with your advice, but Sagittarians can be very intuitive like that. They don't need to spend hours trying to work out what needs to be done. They just get it. They get it straight away. And the first answer, Sagittarius, is very often the best answer. So look around you, be sensitive, see who needs your help. Now, I think in many ways, this weekend is about preparation rather than action. It is a kind of a difficult time for Sagittarius. I've mentioned this earlier in the week. The fact there isn't much fire in the sky. Sagittarius is a fire sign, and in fact, there's no fire in the sky. There's no fire in the sky unless you count Chiron in Aries, which I don't. So you cannot expect the action to come from outside. You have to sort of, you'd like to. I think there's an inclination there for Sagittarians to think that with this lack of fire, but you've got to find it somewhere. You just expect it to happen from out there, and it's not happening. It has to kind of come from yourself, because you're always a Sagittarius, aren't you? I mean, even when the sun is in, even when the sun is in Pisces, like at the moment, you're still a Sagittarius. You're still a fire sign. So that fire does need to come from yourself, and sometimes it's just not there, and that means perhaps you need to do a little more planning than usual. A firework display can't just be done in a haphazard way. It does have to be planned. And so, maybe, with the moon in Virgo as being part of that full moon, the challenge is to make some plans. And the challenge is also perhaps to be a little patient, to just accept that you're not going to get immediate results, immediate action, especially when so many of the people around you are just not in a good state of mind. They don't really know what's going on. You can't spend all weekend telling people what they should be thinking, what they should be doing. You can't. It's not possible. So doing some planning and seeing what is available. Talking to people, being out there, listening, taking notes. Yeah, taking notes. Especially the case if you're working over the weekend, just taking notes, observing what you see, because what you see is important, and that is going to be a pointer to the future. I think it can be a useful weekend, and it can be a weekend where you can be of assistance to certain people, particularly people who are close to you, who seem confused, who need some answers. Yeah, you can provide answers, quick answers, but you don't want to spend a whole weekend giving people answers. Then you'll just completely exhaust yourself. Capricorn. The moon is now in Virgo, and Virgo is an earth sign. So Capricorn, all things being equal, that's good news, isn't it? You do feel over the weekend that there are more opportunities now. In the past, you may have felt that you weren't sort of firing on all cylinders, that you weren't always getting the support you wanted. But now you can sort of you can be more positive, and you can perhaps create some distance between yourself and some of the things that might have been holding you back. But still, we do have a full moon. The moon, by definition, the moon is opposition the sun. You do have to make some distinctions. There are lots of things potentially going on in your life, and some of them will move you forward, and others might actually drag you backwards. And so you do have to decide which is which. What you perhaps don't want to do, Capricorn, is get too obsessed by half-truths. I think there are a lot of half-truths flying around this weekend. People claiming things, and the claims might sound convincing, but they're not really convincing. But it's easy to be misled. So if you're dealing with things, whether it's innuendo, suggestion, things that may or may not be the case, you need to kind of ignore that. And ideally, Capricorn, you won't spend too much time on your feelings. I mean, Capricorn is an earth sign. Capricorn functions best with reference to the three-dimensional world around it, around you. If you're focusing on your emotions, other people's emotions, other people's prejudices, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to concentrate on what is real, and I think that's what you can do. You can find reality, and the things that are real are the things that can take you to the next level, and you need to be able to you need to be able to distinguish, and that is going to be that's going to be really important. So really, anything that takes you beyond yourself in a non-emotional way should be welcomed. It may be that you're going to come across certain truths, and you'll know it's truth. The reason you'll know it's the truth is because it'll be obvious, and it will be materially obvious. It can be demonstrated in a material sense that something is true. And I know we're always told there's no such thing as an absolute truth, but there are some absolute truths around this weekend. And as a Capricorn, I think that you will know what those absolute truths are. That does seem to me to be positive. And in the process, you may have to evaluate the nature of certain relationships. Because this weekend the moon is opposition Saturn. Saturn is your ruler, and so the moon rules Capricorn, the moon rules Cancer, which is your opposite sign. Now, there may be certain relationships which are challenging, but which nonetheless shouldn't be rejected out of hand. It may be there are certain people who are offering you a vision of the truth, and if you actually listen to them and you actually consider the details of what they're saying, you listen hard to them, and you'll realize that they are speaking the truth, even if you don't entirely agree with them. So there is a possibility that your life can be elevated through the right relationships. But that elevation may not be easy, at least in the first instance, because you may be a little bit suspicious. And in fact, the people that can do you the most good this weekend, not just people, maybe the situations that can do you the most good, are the situations that you feel that you have least in common with. If something just feels alien, out of place, sensible Capricorn, your first inclination might be to run away. But I don't think that's the right approach, of course, unless you're dealing with something that is genuinely dangerous. So yes, I think you need to be open-minded. That is important, and I think it's also important that you don't get too tied up in your emotions, because emotions are not your strong suit. I mean, they aren't in general, because Capricorn is an earth sign, but this weekend particularly, there are a lot of emotions flying around, but you don't really want to get involved, because I don't think it would do you much good, and it might actually hold you back. Aquarius. It's a time, Aquarius, when you may feel that things aren't entirely going your way this weekend. I mean, it's not because anything objectively bad is happening. I think it's more because you're doing a lot of thinking, you're doing a lot of analysing, you're trying to work out what's right, what's wrong, and it does seem that there are things to be concerned about. Now, I'm not saying that these concerns are massive. They're just things that require your attention. Just, you're starting to perhaps think like thinking about the future, what can go wrong in the future, and so what do you need to do to avoid things going wrong in the future? So that might be the kind of way that you're starting to think, and doesn't sound very exciting, but it might actually be the right approach. Just having a depth that might not make you popular, but a depth which is appropriate for you. And this full moon this weekend, it does cross the financial axis of your chart. So there is a financial dimension to the full moon. If you look hard enough, you will start to see the truth about your own finances. You'll start to see the picture. Okay, you might not like the picture, but at least you're seeing the picture. And of course, once you see the picture, you are in a position to make constructive changes. But because of this preoccupation that I think many Aquarians are going to feel, your links with other people may be disrupted a bit. Yes, you're trying to get on with other people, as we all are, but there's a distraction there. I think you're thinking perhaps too much about yourself and your own interests to be able to give sufficient time to other people. And yeah, I would suggest that you probably should just accept the situation. And like on Saturday, there's a semi-sextile between Venus and Saturn. Saturn is your ruler. Semi-sextile Venus. Venus is the planet of relationships. So if Venus is semi-sextile Saturn, it's like your concerns about the world could have, I won't say a disruptive influence on relationships, but they could be a drag on relationships. Other people are going to notice it, particularly the people close to you. And so if you're not going to be able to give someone everything, then perhaps you shouldn't bother. Perhaps you should just fall back on your own resources. I mean, things will change. It's just the way it is right now. And yes, I think if the most constructive thing that can happen this weekend is that you can reach some important conclusions about the complexities of your own life. And once you've made those conclusions, then you can start taking action. And that is a constructive way of using this weekend's full moon. Pisces. Okay, there is a full moon, as I've been telling pretty much all the signs. There's a full moon. This full moon is right across the main axis of your chart. I mean, you've got moon in Virgo, your opposite sign, sun in Pisces, which is your sign, full moon. This full moon could have an impact on relationships because, the moon is in Virgo, your opposite sign. You might start to realize the truth about someone. Someone you've been spending a lot of time with, or someone that is important to you, or okay, maybe it's a new relationship that you've recently been involved with, but I think the truth is there. It's there to be seen. Now, that is no guarantee that you actually will see it, but it's there, and I would advise you to consider it. And okay, may not just be about relationships. It may be about the outside world. Some situation you're involved with. Could be a social situation, could be a work situation, just some situation that is separate from your immediate sphere, from your everyday life. And again, you see the truth about it. You see it. It's there. You see the details, and your emotions and on an emotional level. Remember, Pisces is an emotional sign. You can feel it. You know the truth. And so, armed with the truth, you can make changes. But, of course, that doesn't mean you will make changes, because just because you know the truth doesn't mean you're going to act on the truth. So I suppose I should say, well, over to you. Now, on Sunday, Venus makes a square to Jupiter. Now, the reason that is important is because Jupiter is your ruling planet. And so with Venus square Jupiter, the square is a little bit difficult. Venus might be another person. Venus is the planet of relationships. So it may be that on Sunday you might think that, you might take the view that you and someone else are you're not really on the same wavelength. Particularly at the time of a full moon. We've got a full moon already across the main axis of your chart. Full moon very much about relationships, and then Venus makes a square to Jupiter. You might just find someone a bit off-putting. The way they express themselves, the way they express their feelings, you may not be entirely comfortable with it. I don't think we're talking about a major conflict, but it's just something you're aware of. Also, Venus is the planet of money, and it's square Jupiter. So some Pisceans may be tempted to spend too much money. I don't know why. Maybe you feel you have to spend money. Maybe someone will pressurize you into spending money. Maybe you'll see something nice on Amazon or whatever on the internet, and you'll want to buy it. I would suggest you think twice. If you don't need it, don't buy it. But Venus square Jupiter is certainly encouraging you to spend more money than you're comfortable with once you realize you've spent the money. Before you spent the money, you may want to just spend the money, but once you spent the money, you'll realize you made a mistake, I think. So do be a bit careful there, and don't allow yourself to be talked into things. So on Sunday, yes, I think there is some possibility that happens, but I'm not saying that everyone is up to no good. Everyone, no, I'm not saying that at all, really. Let me rephrase that. I'm not saying that everyone should be ignored in terms of their opinions. The moon is in Virgo, in your opposite sign. And actually, the moon in Virgo may represent someone who is very sensible, who understands the details, who can give you some good practical advice. So perhaps you should listen to them. But you see, the problem is that there are other people who are completely clueless. There are some people who really know what they're talking about this weekend, and there are a lot of other people who are totally clueless, and you really should not listen to anything they say. So if you can't decide who to trust and who not to trust, then probably best thing to do is trust no one. In fact, almost certainly the best thing to do is trust no one. But if someone really stands out stands out from everyone else, someone who is clear, makes sense, they don't, they're not a flake, then yeah, maybe you should listen to them. But always listen to people with a slight amount of caution, because there is always that danger that the people around you are just just confused, and they might pass that confusion onto you, or rather dump that confusion onto you, and that is not something you want. Time now for the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is a weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? The first hexagram I got was hexagram number 12, standstill. That is not standstill. I've got that that is not standstill at all. Actually, I'm just going to change that. I think we should show you the right hexagram while I'm at it. The hexagram standstill is very obvious. So really sorry about that. Okay, this is what standstill looks like. Sorry about that. That is standstill. You can see top 3 lines are unbroken. Bottom 3 lines are broken. It's a time where we can't get anything done. Other people are going to be unhelpful. It's like, I think the Wilhelm version of the I Ching says something like, the good departs, and the evil, coming in. The disintegrating elements are in their ascendancy. The good elements have just disappeared. Hence, the strong lines of top 3 lines, you could regard that as like heaven, and the bottom 3 lines are earth, and heaven has retreated. And so, in the first instance this weekend, it might actually be very difficult to get anything done. People are not cooperative. They don't know what they're doing. They might even be up to no good. And yeah, nothing happens. And we might just feel ourselves to be completely blocked. So yes, in the first instance, that is really difficult. But fortunately, the top line moves. So the top line moving does actually suggest that in the end there is a break to the deadlock. Perhaps this relates more to sort of end of Saturday into Sunday, or at least late on Sunday maybe. Late on Saturday, the deadlock starts to get broken. We start to get the breaks we need. We start to make progress, but the thing is not to give up here. Just because we're in a standstill situation doesn't mean nothing is happening. We just have to keep going. We may feel that we're absolutely wasting our time, but in the end, we will make the breakthrough. And I think at the same time, we'll start to get some recognition. I mean, if it is a social situation. So beginning of a weekend looks difficult. Doesn't look as if we're getting anywhere. The standstill breaks, and then we can move to the second hexagram, which is gathering together. So you can see, just to go back, see standstill, there's the top line, unbroken. But because it breaks, we move to this one, hexagram 45, which is gathering together. And this is a hexagram about coming together with other people, perhaps to solve a problem. This is Sunday. There are people out there who can help us out. Can we help ourselves out? Can we actually help ourselves out without needing other people? Depends. It depends how how well you regard yourself. Because the I Ching is kind of saying that some people can sort the whole thing out themselves if they are sufficiently elevated or they have sufficient status. Now, I don't mean status. Okay, maybe the I Ching was talking about status in a social sense, but this is not what I'm really talking about. Just are you in that position to sort things out yourself without needing external support? But if you do need external support, that might be, you might have to consider the possibility that leadership has to pass on to someone else. It may not be you in full control, but that's okay. You don't have to be in control to sort things out. So it may be that to resolve the standstill as you move into Sunday, bringing people together, perhaps accepting that someone else has to be the leader, has to make the decisions, and then I think there can be a resolution. But overall for this weekend, don't be dismayed if a weekend starts on quite a difficult note. It seems everything is blocked, because there will be a resolution. Finally, there is the astrology, and I'm going to talk about this woman, Wendy Williams, who I know absolutely nothing about, and I feel a bit embarrassed talking about someone I know nothing about. I like to talk about people I'm fascinated by. I like to talk about Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden, but I'm perhaps a little bit out of my comfort zone here. But the thing is, she's been in the news, and because she's had this diagnosis of aphasia, which is, I think, a general communication issue. I don't know. Maybe it's difficult for her to communicate. But plus is frontotemporal dementia, and she's only 59 years old. Again, I don't know what frontotemporal dementia is compared with other things, but I suppose it's kind of always a bit worrying when you see that someone who's only 59 has dementia, and I'm 61, God, I suppose people can get dementia young, that's quite a frightening thing, isn't it? But I thought I would look at her chart, and perhaps look at what's going on in her life. I'm just going to be focusing on the astrology. A lot of you may know a lot more about her than me, but let's see how it works. This is a time chart, so she's got Aquarius rising. It's interesting that there has been a Venus-Mars conjunction this week. And I've talked about this Venus-Mars conjunction. I had a whole video, or a part of a video, where I was talking about people with Venus-Mars conjunctions. And here we have someone who has a Venus-Mars conjunction in Gemini. And there's been this announcement about her medical condition this week, I think on the day. I think the announcement was on Thursday, and I think the Venus-Mars conjunction was on Thursday. So the announcement with her with a Venus-Mars conjunction less than a degree apart, Venus at 21-23 Gemini, Mars at 22-4 Gemini, it did happen right on that conjunction. And so I think that's kind of interesting. It's a reminder that if you've got a close aspect in your chart, you may be vulnerable to the cycle of, or not necessarily vulnerable, but you may be affected by the cycle of those two planets. So if they're really close. I was told that guy, someone who just, I think it was when I was being taught midpoints and harmonics, I think it was Michael Harding, he told me that in the 1980s, and in the midpoints and harmonics class he said that. So I've always remembered that if you've got things close, you can be you can really pick up on that. So that's one aspect of her chart. So Venus Mars conjunction, clearly someone who is very charismatic in Gemini, and someone who is disruptive. I think she's known as a shock jock. Venus is about harmony, but it's in Gemini. And then Mars is conjunct Venus, so Mars is really stirring it up. And all this thing about homophobic slurs and this kind of thing. Well, you can see Venus Mars conjunction in Gemini. You can really imagine how that might be how that might be working. And of course, she's got Mercury in Aries, angular Mercury in Aries. Sorry, Mercury in Leo, angular Mercury in Leo. Okay, Mercury, it's not like Mercury in Aries, but it's angular. So Mercury angular is always going to, when you've got an angular planet, that planet is going to manifest often quite strongly in someone's life, regardless of the sign. But in Leo, she can probably communicate in a sort of larger than life kind of way. The moon in Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio is tricky. At first sight, you might regard that moon in Scorpio as being difficult, because the moon is fallen in Scorpio. The moon is exalted in Taurus. So if you've got moon in Scorpio, that's not good, right? But the thing about that moon is that the moon is a nighttime planet. She was born at night. She was born at 9:30 p.m. So the moon likes being at night. It enjoys the darkness, the hours of darkness. So because it's a nocturnal planet. So that is a strength. Further, moon at night likes to be above the horizon. So that's a second strength. A third strength is that the moon is a feminine planet, and it's in a feminine sign in Scorpio. So although the moon appears to be fallen, it's actually in some respects very strong. It's like, for example, Bill Clinton or Adolf Hitler have Saturn in Leo. Saturn in Leo is in its detriment. But no, that's true. But they've got Saturn above. They had Saturn above the horizon in the daytime, because Saturn is a daytime planet. In a masculine sign, so the moon is actually not as bad as it looks, and the moon in that position, right at the top of the chart, allows her to get attention, and allows her to project a sort of a larger than life personality, to become a shock jock, to be into gossip, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's sort of square the ascendant on the at the top of the chart. So yeah, in fact, moon is not as bad as it looks. Moon is 10 degrees from Neptune. Neptune is square Mercury. So Neptune square Mercury could be some of a sort of deception and confusion. I don't say deception, but I suppose Mercury square Neptune likes the glamour of sort of radio and broadcasting and whatever. It may be that Neptune, Mercury Neptune, says something about the illness she's going through, that she started. This aphasia and dementia. Maybe this is a kind of a Mercury issue about how you communicate, how you understand what's going on in the world. So that might say something about it. Also, I should say that Mercury is at 15.5 Scorpio. It's very close to the sesquiquadrate with the Aries point. So it's about Neptune. She's a very Neptune and the wider world. The Aries point is the global point. It's a world point. And Neptune is on it. So she can tune into sort of the fantasies of the world, and that probably helps make her help make her so successful. Particularly as she's got Venus square the ascendant, and of course she would then have the ascendant sort of approximately on the Moon-Neptune midpoint, so she can really project that Moon-Neptune, whatever fantasies that her audience want to get into, maybe all that gossip, celebrities, maybe that's how Moon-Neptune works so well. Moon opposition Jupiter. Of course, Moon opposition Jupiter. That is a very excessive position, and it's in fixed signs. It's very determinedly over the top. Gets stuck into something, and then it just it goes on. It can't stop. So that is certainly excessive, and we've sort of got Jupiter. I don't know precisely. Jupiter's sort of on the Jupiter. So she's got kind of Jupiter opposition the Moon-Neptune midpoint. She's got Jupiter square the ascendant. So that Jupiter down there is certainly making its influence felt. So that's her broad chart. She's also got Pluto on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. I mean, Mars-Saturn is it's aspecting her Mars-Saturn midpoint. I mean, it's not exactly there, but Mars-Saturn is the death axis, restriction axis. So Pluto, I suppose, could be something that starts slowly and gets slowly builds up, and I think she's obviously been unwell for quite a long time. I don't know whether that Pluto aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint has anything to do with that. So what's going on in her life now? Now it does seem that things have been going wrong with her life for quite a long time. I mean, you sort of go back now. I haven't really gone into her biography, but she had this show called the Wendy Williams Show it ended on June the 17th, 2022. I think the last show was actually a recording. She didn't actually appear on the show on June the 17th, 2022. And earlier in the year, she'd had these issues with her bank, her bank questioning whether she was able to make clear decisions, was questioning her ability to make financial decisions, and was restricting her access to her bank account. I don't know when this started. I think it sort of started coming out in February, but that would have been, I think, something going on at the end of 2021. So if we want to consider, for example, a solar return, I think we should probably be looking at a 2021 solar return. This is a solar return prior to the issues with her bank, and also the solar return immediately prior to her show ending, the Wendy Williams show. So I would have said solar return 2021 would be the one to go for. So this is her solar return for 2021. So what's interesting is, firstly, look at her moon. Let me just actually show that side by side with her natal chart. So yeah, there's a solar return on the outside. You can see that she has Neptune at 15 degrees 5 minutes Scorpio. And in the solar return, the moon was at 15 degrees dead Scorpio, 15 degrees 0 minutes Scorpio. So the moon was exactly sesquiquadrate the Aries point. And so it was also exactly on her Neptune. And of course, was the moon in the Via Combusta. The Via Combusta ends at 15-0 Scorpio, so we don't know whether the moon was in the Via Combusta, but the fact that the moon was picking up on her Neptune, I think, is perhaps an important signature. And additionally, we have if you look at her solar return, the Sun was at 26-24 Cancer. So it was opposition Pluto, and there was a Venus-Mars conjunction. So remember, the Venus-Mars conjunction, it's just a general signature. It doesn't matter, perhaps, that it doesn't really matter whether or not that Venus-Mars conjunction is aspecting anything. The point is, she's perhaps very sensitive to the Venus-Mars conjunction in general. So having a Venus-Mars conjunction around the time of her birthday in 2021 might certainly have had an impact. I think that was a difficult solar return. One other thing about the moon at 15 Scorpio during her solar return. The moon during her solar return, Uranus was at 14-22 Taurus at her solar return, and so there was an fairly exact moon opposition Uranus on her Neptune. So again, it was a really tough solar return, and if we look at that solar return in general, there's a reminder that the 14 Scorpio, that Uranus is starting to make a square to her Mercury. Okay, it doesn't make that square immediately, but it may be that, if she's got these issues like aphasia, frontotemporal dementia, have just been diagnosed. When did it start? It possibly started as the moon made the square to Mercury, and so the moon was starting to move to, in 2021, the moon was starting to move Uranus was starting to move towards that square with Mercury, and that would have happened a bit later. I don't know precisely when the moon made that, Uranus made that. But Uranus would have been and after it making the square to Mercury, it would have made a square to her descendant, and then right now, the moon is moving towards an opposition with her moon. So this is a period of a few years when Uranus would be causing her all sorts of problems. I would have said. So going back to let's look at it's going back to her chart, and another thing going on last year, this year, you'll notice she's got a Saturn return. Her Saturn is at 4-8 Pisces. So that Saturn return has passed, but maybe a lot of the damage was caused when she had that Saturn return. She would have had the Saturn return, the first Saturn return, she would have had it last year, but she would have had it again earlier in this year. And so Saturn return for her has perhaps been causing quite a few problems. Then there is her solar arc direction. So solar arc directions is when you move every single planet in the chart 1 degree, 1 degree for every year. So at 57. 59 now. Well, she's 50. If you want to know what's going on when she's 59. You would just move everything 1 degree, and so you'd move it, which would be 59 degrees. So looking at her solar arc directions for when she lost the for when she the June 17th, 2022, which was the last episode of the Wendy Williams show, seeing how they affect her natal chart. So look at the solar arc directed Venus-Mars. So she has this Venus-Mars conjunction in Gemini. So we move this Venus-Mars conjunction 1 degree for every year. So you move it approximately 59 well, in this case, 50, if it would be 57 degrees approximately. And so this Venus-Mars conjunction moves on towards 1718 Leo. And so you can see that Venus-Mars conjunction is exactly on her Mercury. And so that's where the problem is. If it was just Venus, it wouldn't be such a problem. But she's got Mars on her Mercury, and so I suppose this is when almost exactly as Mars hits. Solar arc directed Mars, 1749 Leo, is on her Mercury, which is at 1740 Leo, and so that's when she ends the Wendy Williams show. And after that, I mean, it seems that her health disintegrated further, and of course right now we've got this this other, where's Wendy Williams, so we're going to find out what has been happening, but this is perhaps about Mercury, and perhaps Mercury is a signature of the disease that she's battling. That is possible, because Mercury does seem to be about communication, and this is very much how she's having to deal with aphasia. So that's it. I mean, as I said, I don't really know much about or anything about Wendy Williams, apart from what I've sort of read in a Wikipedia article. One final point I should make about Wendy Williams's chart. I talk about midpoints. She seems to be a really over-the-top person, and if you want an evidence of the fact that she is an over-the-top person, look at her midheaven. Her midheaven is at 7 degrees 8 minutes Sagittarius, and her midheaven is exactly on her opposition, her Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So clearly in her work, in her career, she's been able to present Mars-Jupiter. She's able to really push forward that Mars-Jupiter energy. And then, this is a midpoint, but you can almost see by eye. And so, another reminder that we do need to use midpoints we don't need to use it, but I would advise you to use midpoints if you possibly can when interpreting charts. Okay, I'm sorry I didn't know more about Wendy Williams, but as I said, until yesterday, I'd never heard of her. So I hope you found that of some interest. If you like this video, if you enjoyed the video, I would of course be grateful if you press the like button. If you're not subscribed and you like the video, I would of course be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.